Howdy, product data professionals, and welcome back to another episode of IDA Optimized. Today, Eli's going to talk about the importance of labeling, and he's going to show us a back-end application we use called SkuDB that assists in our project deliveries for our customers. We hope you enjoy. Remember to like, share, and comment. Take it away, Eli.
Thanks, Joe. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about the labeling of categories in a hierarchy or in a taxonomy. And we're going to be looking at the site SKUs.com, which is a site our team uses to try out different concepts and to validate ideas and try different organizing principles as we're in between our regular project work as a services company. SKUs.com is a good place, though, to look at category labels, really any website we could use. And when we say labels, we mean the names, or sometimes what people would call the titles of the categories. So here it's abrasive blasting equipment, abrasive brushes, arbors and adapters. And there's a lot of work that goes into these labels because, number one, the labels are being really negotiated at the same time that the structure of the categories is happening. So often when you're designing a taxonomy, you're labeling and you're thinking about the structure at the same time. And the labels really are a big part of the style and the usability and findability of products within the taxonomy. So what we name things really matters. To use an obvious example, here's abrasive brushes. If we had ladders behind the abrasive brushes category, it would make no sense and nobody would be able to find anything. So if you just labeled something incorrectly, it makes things completely nonsensical and invisible. And then there's all the different degrees of gray in between. And then there's the theoretically perfect label that is the best label for the greatest number of people to help them find the products effectively. And finding what that perfect label is, it can be, you're triangulating a lot of different factors. You might be looking at competitors. You might be looking at your own style guidelines. And you might be looking at web metrics and traffic data that tells you that something might be wrong in the way that people are navigating to the product. You may also be looking at search logs and things like that to look at what language your customers use. So you're looking at all these different factors and trying to come up with the perfect names for things. And we just wanted to talk a little bit today about the types of some of the most important things you would think about when making labels. So one is the length of a label. So we want labels, ideally they're shorter and they're brief and they're easy to understand. When we start mashing together too many concepts in a label, or it goes on for too long, it takes longer to read, it's harder for people to comprehend. So we want to keep things simple and typically keep them simple and short. We also want to think about the style of the labels. So it's important to know whether we're doing things in proper case, how we're going to use an ampersand, is everything going to be plural? What are the style guidelines that are going to govern these labels just from a form standpoint? And then lastly, we want to think about the products that might be hard to find within these categories and making some trade-offs. We might not need to mention every single thing that's underneath a category. And we're thinking about how to distill that into the most essential labels. So this category here, discs, this might have disc accessories as well. But just to make things simpler, we may have made the decision to keep it simple and go with the name discs. There's a lot of decisions like that being made within these taxonomies because ultimately we're trying to make things easy to find, and we're hoping to shorten the distance between our users searching for something and finding it. One thing I wanted to show is I'm going to jump over to, so when we're working on these taxonomies, we often think of metrics and using metrics in order to attempt to identify where we might be having problems. And I wanted to share just a really simple one here. And I'm going to have to switch my window. And I'm going to jump over to SkuDB. And this is a taxonomy design environment that we're using to manage the SKUs.com hierarchy that you saw on the previous screen. But one of the things that we can do, there's a lot of information that we store in here around metadata for the categories, but we also have some reports in here. And I'm just going to look at one report here that's of interest to us today. And this is, let's see, does it look? No, it's better like this. So what we're looking at is a distribution of all the category labels across the entire taxonomy. And there's a little over 10,000 categories in the SKUs.com taxonomy. And this is a distribution of the lengths of the labels. So here on the far end of the distribution, I have some 1-character labels, like just the letter C under batteries. I might have to look into that and think about whether that works or not. But at the edges of the distribution is where we tend to find the questions and the issues. On the other end of the spectrum, those where we typically find our problems, and those are the long labels. Long labels are often, issues with long labels often overlap with structural issues in the hierarchy, or unresolved style guidelines, or unresolved preferred terminology or abbreviations. And this probably is a good example of that. This isn't so bad. You know, it's only 44 characters, stainless steel blanks, plates, and sheet stock. Not a good label, definitely, but for that to be the worst label in the entire hierarchy, I think that's not too bad. What we would, it's nice to see it in a distribution, but we'd probably just want to see these labels in text here. So panel board and load center circuit breakers, immersion heater replacement thermostats, high pressure contrast injection tubing. We can see that there's a lot of concepts trying to be jammed into a label here, and maybe we could do better here on these longest labels. So it's one metric that sometimes helps us identify opportunities to improve. I had one other thing I wanted to share here to drive home a little bit another concept, which is long and short labels. So depending on the context that we're working in, we might want to be looking at the long labels or the short labels of a taxonomy. And this is an exercise that we use sometimes to drive home the importance of managing both long and short labels within a taxonomy. So 2 different versions depending on the context. So we're going to read through 2 lists of category names, and we're going to read through it somewhat carefully. And we'll use a stopwatch to time how long it takes to read through the list of names, or just count 1 1,000, 2 1,000. So we're going to give a list of categories coming up here, and we'll read through it and see how long it takes. Okay, that list took about maybe 6 seconds for me to read through, 6, 7 seconds maybe. And we're going to try going through another list now that's slightly different, and we'll see how long it takes to read through this list. So here we go. Okay, that took me about 3, maybe 4 seconds. Somewhere around half as long, maybe just a little bit more than half as long, but somewhere around there. And ultimately, for those of you who didn't notice, it's the same list. The first list just had women's in front of all the labels. So this is when we talk about a long label, this tells us the context of the athletic sneaker, of the ballet flats. If we were just looking at this category and we had no other information, the long label really tells us what it is. But if we already know we're in the women's section, then, and we can get rid of that qualifying word of women's, then it makes a much easier list. I can almost read vertically. And it's a good example of how much easier it is to read short labels than longer labels. So that's why you see so much work go into keeping the labels short so that they're shoppable. And if you think about the amount of time that we spend collectively as customers on these websites, shortening that journey, making it easier to find things, ultimately we're talking about respecting and optimizing possibly thousands of hours of our customers' time. Or our users' time, depending on what kind of website we're working on. So hopefully that was an example that made sense to people. And I just had one more site I was going to share. This is one that I like to look at just when we're talking about how important short labels are. Nordstrom, which is a retail website, they are really good with short labels, and they're really good at showing context within their mega menu here. So they clearly do a lot of work refining these short labels. And of course, any of these labels out of context, it might be hard to know what we're talking about. Coats and jackets for what? Pants for what? But it's they do a really good job with these short labels and making this very easy to shop. So Joe, that's our short presentation today on labeling. We'll have more sessions coming up where we talk through other concepts related to hierarchy design, like hierarchy structure and images are some of the next videos that we're going to work on.
Thank you, Eli. We do look forward to the upcoming sessions. I did have a question before we part. You mentioned competitors, and I'm wondering how much energy should a company put into evaluating their competitors' labels versus perfecting their own? Is there some formula there?
Well, it's really important because oftentimes our customers are using our competitors' websites as well, and those competitive sites establish expectations or establish vocabulary that we should definitely be aware of and possibly be following. So we want to focus, typically our customers look very closely at the labels of their competitors and evaluate case by case whether those labels should be followed or be deviated from. But most of our customers look very closely at a handful of their competitors when they're considering labeling, because it's not just labeling, it's considering labeling and structure. So those are usually part of the same analysis. So we're looking very often, we're looking very closely at competitors as we design.
Okay, so the takeaway there is pay attention to your competition. Thank you very much, Eli. Well, that concludes today's episode of IDA Optimized. Please remember to like, share, and comment, and stay tuned for future videos. Thank you.